What's up, everyone? So we're gonna get into the most popular contract that we use in Texas. It is the 1-4 residential contract. Every agent needs to know how to use this contract, fill it out. It's the most popular contract that we use. As always, check with your broker and check with your own lawyers just to make sure you're filling it out correctly. This video is just for general information and how to fill out the basics of it. There are so many different variations and amendments and ways to fill this contract out, but I'm just going to give a quick walkthrough of the very basic and most popular way to fill out the contract. Okay, let's get into what is on the standard 1-4 contract. This is the contract from November 8th, 2021. It's a pretty basic contract for any home that is 1-4. So a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, townhomes, they would all go under this contract. It's pretty self-explanatory. Number one, the parties. It would be the seller would go first and the buyers would go second. If they're companies, you would put the company name or the LLCs or however they want it to be listed. The property, you can find the legal descriptions on the tax records, lot, block, and then the section or legal description would go here. City, Houston, or whatever city you're in, the county, and the informal address would go in the last line. Exclusions. Exclusions are whatever the seller doesn't want to include with the normal sale of the property. So for example, we put the chandelier in the living room. It could be, like a Ring doorbell or anything that's attached to the house. Refrigerator, washer, dryers, things of that nature that they don't want to include into the sale. The sales price, the first line is the cash portion of the sale. So this person is buying it for $200,000 with 10% down. That would be $20,000 cash. $180,000 would be finance. So you would check off the third party finance addendum that would be included at the end of the contract. Loan assumption, if the seller was going to sell the house with the mortgage and then the buyer would take over the sale, they would take over or they would check off the loan assumption addendum. Seller financing or owner finance, you would check off that last one. Number 4 is what they added new this year, the leases. So a lot of houses are being sold with a tenant in place or with solar panel contracts, or they have mineral rights contracts. So example, for a residential lease, if you had a tenant in place, you would check this off and you would attach the lease contract to the end of this that would have to be transferred. A fixture lease is, for example, the solar panels, water softeners, security system, alarm system, anything that has a lease that has to be transferred with the sale of the house. And the new owner would have to take over that lease. Natural resource lease is any oil, gas, mineral rights, or anything like that. If they're drilling on your property, you would check off the natural resource lease. And did you get copies of it, or if you need to get copies later in the contract, and how many days you would need for that to happen. Number 5, earnest money. The first blank, you would put the title company and their address. In the second blank, the amount of the earnest money generally 1%. So 1% of 200,000 is $2,000, and the option fee that you would include. These two numbers are negotiable and is something you would have to negotiate with the other party. 5.1, if you're going to deliver extra earnest money, let's say you need an extra option period, or you have an extra difficult contract, or difficulty or some special situation with the sellers, you would check off this option for additional earnest money after a certain time period. Termination B, how many days do you want your option period to be? Usually between 5 to 10 days. Scroll down to 6, title policy. Who's going to pay for the title policy? Most of the time the seller will pay for the title policy, and then you would put the title company's name here. It would be the same title company as we put in 5. For number 8, shortages in the area. If the title company finds any problems with the boundaries, lines, or any other issues with the title, in terms of boundary issues, you would check off who would pay off for this, or if you don't really care about the boundary issues, it would say will not be amended. Survey. Generally, we'd like the survey in less than a week if it exists. If it does not exist, who is going to pay for it? So in C1, within 3 days, we want the seller to give us the survey. If the seller does not give us the survey within 3 days or the affidavit, then the buyer will take over and get a new survey. If no survey exists, then you would check off 2, that the buyer will get a new survey, or you can negotiate that the seller will just get the new survey on their own. And option number 3. Objections. What is this property being used for? In general, these properties are going to be for residential use, and then you would put 3 to 5 days for any objections to be rectified here. Is the property in an HOA? Yes or no? If it is in an HOA, then you would need your HOA addendum attached to the contract. Property condition. This is in terms of the seller's disclosure. Most of the time, the seller will have a disclosure for the buyer to review. If there isn't one, then you would ask for one. In part 2, say, give me the seller's disclosure within 3 days or 2 days of execution. If they are not able to give you a seller's disclosure, if it's an inherited property or an investment property that nobody's lived in, then you would check off number 3. Property condition. The buyer accepts the property as is. If you walk through the property and said, hey, the roof is kind of old, we want a new roof, then you would check off number 2. Buyer accept the property as is, and then put your requirements here that the seller will put in a new roof prior to closing, or some wording like that. Residential service contracts, that's your home warranty. If you're going to negotiate for the seller to pay for the home warranty, you would put the amount right here for the warranty. And section 8A, disclosure. This is if you're related to the buyer or the seller. You would put your relationship here. I just wrote buyer's agent is the brother of the buyer. Closing, what day do you want the closing to be? In general, we have 30 days for a closing, but cash buyers can close faster, or if there's any special circumstances, then you would close later. Just talk to your selling agent about what the agreed upon date is right there. Buyer's possession is once the sale of the property has gone through, are the sellers going to stay in the property for a little bit longer, or will they hand over the keys immediately? So if they're going to hand over the keys immediately, the buyer will receive possession upon closing and funding. Or if they need a lease back or some other special circumstances, you would check off this portion, and then you would add a lease back addendum to the end of the contract. Special provisions. Special provisions are special notes or requirements that the buyer or seller has on the property. In general, agents are not allowed to fill this portion out unless they are lawyers. So only the buyer or seller themselves are allowed to fill this out, or a lawyer for any special provisions. Settlement, if you're going to ask for any seller's concessions or credits, so say you want to give us $3,000 towards closing costs, you would fill in a number right here, and that amount would be applied to the buyer's closing costs at the end of the contract. Notices, where do you want all the documents and disclosures and paperwork to go? So the buyer's email address and phone number will go here, and the seller's email address and phone numbers will go here. Section 22, if you're going to add any special or add any addendums or documents, this is where you would check them off. So third-party finance, HOA addendum, seller's temporary lease, that's for the lease back, lead-based paint, if the house is built before 1974, residential leases, if you're gonna have a tenant in place. This is a popular one that we've been using this year, terminate due to lender's appraisal. If there's any other addendums that are not in this list, like the non-realty items addendum, you can add that here. If you have a lawyer or the seller has a lawyer, you would add their information here and make sure the lawyer receives all copies of the document if they want to be a part of this transaction. Execution, when both parties come to an agreement, the last person to touch the contract will put in the date here, and that will start that will execute the file. Buyer and seller signatures go in the. This final section is the broker's information and your information. So on the left side, you would put the buyer's rep information, their broker, and you would check off that they are representing the buyer as the buyer's agent. You put your team name, your email, phone number, your supervisor, your broker's information, and your brokerage's address. On the opposite side, you would put the selling agent's information, selling associate's name, email address, phone number, and all that stuff. If you're selling within your own brokerage, then you would check off seller and buyer as an intermediary, and both of your informations would go on the right side. We'll go on the right side right here, and you would fill out your information on the bottom. On the very last part, you would put the percentage of the commission that you're going to make, or percentage of the sales price that you will make. So standard is 3%, 2%, 2.5%, whatever you negotiated, you would put right there. Option fee and earnest money receipts. The title company will fill this out, and once you email them the contract and everything like that, they will fill this out and sign and date or stamp it for you as soon as they receive the earnest money deposits and option fee. And that should cover most of the 1-4 contract. Just make sure you always check with your brokerage if you're not with our brokerage, and get their specific instructions. All brokerages will want things filled out a certain way, and this is just general knowledge. Yeah, that was a long video. I'm sorry. It's a long and complicated contract. You got to know it front and back and sideways. But thanks for watching. If you have any questions, shoot me a message. I'll be happy to help you out.